There's something quietly timeless about ancient stories, those whispered from candlelit parchment, carried through the breath of the desert winds, and etched into the collective soul of humanity. Tonight, we'll journey into one of the most enduring narratives ever told, the history behind the book of Exodus. But this is not just a biblical account. It is a layered, sweeping tale, a slow unfolding of oppression and liberation, of mystic signs and harsh deserts, of a people wandering under the weight of memory, and the promise of something greater beyond the horizon. Long before this story became the backbone of religions and civilizations, it was born out of whispered oral traditions, carried by tribes seeking meaning, justice, and freedom. And as centuries passed, these stories crystallized, some in scrolls, others in stone. The Exodus, as you'll hear tonight, was not merely about Moses parting the sea. It was about identity, about survival, about the eternal tug between power and hope, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. As you gently fall into sleep, let your imagination be your guide. Picture ancient Egypt under a moonlit sky, golden temples casting long shadows over the Nile. Hear the distant clink of chains and the quiet murmurs of those who dreamt of liberation. Feel the cold breath of the Red Sea's wind as the tide begins to tremble. This is not a sermon, nor is it fiction. It is a voyage through layers of myth, fact, and human memory. We'll walk the slow path from Egypt's lavish courts to the silent deserts of Sinai. Along the way, you'll hear the echoes of plagues, the rustling of burning bushes, and the silent questions that still linger in our modern world. What does freedom truly mean? And at what cost is it earned? So wherever you are right now, whether it's nightfall in London, a quiet dawn in Jakarta, or a gentle evening in California, take a moment, leave a comment, and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'd love to know who's drifting into history with me tonight. If your mind is busy or your heart heavy, let this story carry it gently for a while. There's no rush here, only slow, soothing history that unfolds like a desert breeze, calm and ancient. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Sherry, so let's begin. Before we meet the Israelites, before we witness miracles or part seas, we must first understand the land they lived in and the shadows they lived under. Imagine the landscape, golden light stretching across the riverbanks of the Nile, shimmering like threads of fire at dawn. Tall papyrus reeds sway gently in the breeze. Date palms rise like sentinels, casting long shadows over fishermen hauling nets from quiet waters. This was not a quiet corner of the world. This was Kemet, the black land, the heart of civilization, a place of grandeur and permanence. Egypt, in the time before the Exodus, was a world power like no other. Its stone temples scraped the sky. Its rulers were considered gods. Its cities hummed with the rhythm of industry, agriculture, worship, and war. Its people were born into order, a divine structure that determined their role in life and afterlife. And within that grand system, deep within its underbelly, lived the Hebrews. But Egypt didn't begin with cruelty. The Hebrew people, descendants of Jacob, grandson of Abraham, once came to Egypt not as slaves, but as welcomed guests. The story goes that Joseph, son of Jacob, was sold into slavery by his brothers and rose, improbably, to become Pharaoh's trusted advisor during a time of famine. In gratitude, his kin were offered fertile land in the Delta region, in a place called Goshen. There they grew, thrived, multiplied, and then time passed. Pharaohs died, names were forgotten, and the favor once extended to these shepherd outsiders slowly turned to suspicion. The book of Exodus captures the cold shift in a single, quiet line. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. That line is heavy. It signals a turn in the wind, a chill creeping into the warmth. This new king looked upon the Hebrews, numerous and foreign in culture, and saw a threat. Egypt, after all, had enemies pressing in from beyond its borders. The Hyksos had once invaded, perhaps through treachery or alliance with people like these. So fear took root. And when power fears, it does not retreat, it tightens its grip. Brick by brick, the Hebrews were pressed into bondage. Their limbs became tools, their songs silenced under the crack of the whip. The vast store cities of Pithom and Ramses were razed by their hands, not with joy, but under the hot sun, with backs bowed, and hope slowly being beaten from generation to generation. But let us not move too quickly. To understand the pain of the Hebrews, we must understand the pride of the Egyptians. Pharaoh, the living god, the son of Ra, stood at the apex of society. His word was law, his presence divine. Below him, the elite scribes and priests kept records and rituals flowing like the Nile itself. Below them, merchants and soldiers held the borders and the economy strong. And at the base of the great pyramid of society were the workers, farmers, slaves, and among them the Hebrews. And yet, Egypt was not simply cruel. It was beautiful, from the halls of Karnak to the towering obelisks of Luxor. Its architecture was music in stone. Their gods were many falcon-headed Horus, motherly Isis, jackal-faced Anubis, each commanding their own rituals, temples, and fears. The people believed that life was a preparation for eternity, that the body must be preserved, the soul weighed against a feather, and the heart judged by the gods. Every life was a thread in a cosmic order, but order, when corrupted by fear, can become tyranny. As Hebrew children were born in greater number, Pharaoh grew anxious. He saw a people multiplying in his midst, worshipping strange gods, speaking strange tongues. He feared rebellion, betrayal, uprising. And so, under his command, oppression deepened. He gave orders that would haunt history. Midwives were instructed to kill male Hebrew infants at birth. A quiet genocide, a whispered erasure of a future generation. But the midwives Shifra and Pua refused. Simple women, yet their defiance, quiet as it was, echoed louder than Pharaoh's decree. They lied, said the Hebrew women birthed too quickly, and life, fragile, precious, continued to find cracks in the walls of oppression. Still, Pharaoh did not relent. He commanded then that every male Hebrew child be thrown into the Nile. The river that once sustained life now became a graveyard, a sacred artery of Egypt, tainted with silent screams. It's in this moment, this terrible silence, that a mother places her child in a woven basket, seals it with pitch, and sets it afloat upon the very waters meant to drown him. The current carries him past crocodiles, reeds, and dangers unseen, toward fate, toward destiny. But that is for later. For now, let's stay a little longer in Egypt. It is dusk again. The shadows stretch across the water. A priest lights a lantern in the temple of Amun. Somewhere far from the palaces, a Hebrew elder sits outside his dwelling, his face cracked like old parchment, whispering a story to a child too young to understand. Once, he says, we were free, and one day we will be again. That hope, quiet and battered, never dies completely. Even in the greatest empire on earth, even beneath the whip, and under the shadow of gods not their own, the Hebrews whispered the name of a different God, a God who sees, a God who hears, a God who remembers. But Egypt does not yet know what storm is coming, nor does the river know it will one day part. Not yet. When we speak of oppression in ancient Egypt, it is easy to imagine only whips and walls, but the truth, like the desert, is more complex. It wasn't always in the loud violence of punishment. Sometimes it was in the silence, the absence, the daily, aching stillness of a people forgotten beneath stone and sun. The Hebrews, once welcomed in the fertile land of Goshen, had become strangers in the land their ancestors were invited to. Over time, they were no longer neighbors, but tools. Their names were no longer called, only counted. Their dignity traded for quotas of bricks. The Egyptian state, in its unmatched organization, turned oppression into a system. Each Hebrew man was assigned a taskmaster. Each sunrise brought new orders. Stones to lift, mud to mix, straw to gather, walls to raise higher than the day before. Day in, day out, they labored, the air heavy with heat and the scent of wet clay. Their hands roughened, their backs bent, and yet they endured. It wasn't only men who bore the weight. Women worked too, hauling, cooking, birthing in haste and fear. The children, what few remained, grew in the shadows of pyramids not made for them. They learned early to be quiet, to avoid notice, to keep hope as a hidden ember, not a flame. And yet, in the stillness of the night, when the overseers slept and the desert cooled, the Hebrews would whisper stories. Stories of Abraham, who walked with a God that made covenants, of Isaac, nearly sacrificed but saved, of Jacob, who wrestled angels, of Joseph, whose dreams foretold famine and favor. These stories were more than memories. They were resistance. They reminded a weary people that they were not merely slaves. They were part of a line, a promise, something ancient and divine. But what does it mean to carry faith when freedom is a memory? It means waking every day knowing your child might be taken. It means lifting stones while your heart quietly breaks. It means singing lullabies to babies knowing Pharaoh's men may come in the night. Still, they sang, quietly, because a song, even if barely whispered, cannot be enslaved. Some of the Egyptians, perhaps, watched them, wondered about their strength, their strange prayers, their language that curled and swayed like the reeds of the Nile. Some mocked them. Others feared them. The more they suffered, the more they grew. The more Pharaoh struck them, the more they multiplied. There's something powerful in that paradox, how pain can deepen roots rather than sever them. Pharaoh's heart, cold and calculating, could not understand it. His advisors warned him, the more you crush them, the stronger they become. But Pharaoh, like all tyrants, believed fear could shape destiny. So he intensified the burden. He ordered more bricks, less straw, harder quotas, crueler punishments. The Hebrews cried out, not only to each other, but to their God. The scriptures say, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant. But that remembering was not yet seen, so they waited, and they worked, the dust of each day rising like incense to a silent sky. Among them, there must have been old men who had given up hope, and young ones who dreamed of escape. Women who buried children, and others who still dared to bring life into such a world. The spectrum of human emotion, grief, rage, numbness, love, it all lived within the Hebrew camps. And in the shadows of these lives, a quiet tension brewed. Some Hebrews began to believe this was simply how it would always be, that Egypt was their fate, that the chains were part of their inheritance, that suffering was a silent kind of worship. Others resisted, not with weapons, but with memory. They kept their traditions, circumcised their sons, marked holy days, refused to forget. There's something sacred in that kind of resistance, when a people carry their story so deeply that even slavery cannot erase it. Imagine one of those nights, a fire flickering low, children huddled around a grandmother whose voice is sandpaper soft, telling the story of how God once walked among their ancestors. The children, wide-eyed, ask, "Will he come for us too?" And the grandmother, her eyes wet and distant, whispers, "He will, but not yet, not yet." It's in that pause that the heart of Exodus beats strongest, not in the miracles to come, but in the waiting, in the ordinary days of pain, in the silences between the prayers, in the moments when hope is so faint it's barely a whisper, and yet it lives. And somewhere, perhaps that same night, a Hebrew man quietly teaches his son how to make bricks with blistered fingers, not because he wants him to suffer, but because he believes the boy must survive, must endure long enough to see the change that he himself may never witness. That is legacy. That is resilience. Meanwhile, Pharaoh grows increasingly paranoid. He sees the Hebrews not as people, but as numbers, as threats, as shadows, and he speaks again with the coldness of fear. Every son that is born you shall cast into the river. The Nile, source of life, becomes a tool of death. And yet, even then, life slips through. Because among those mothers, one will defy him, and one child will float where others sank. But for now, the Hebrews wait. They wake to the weight of labor and sleep to the sound of weeping. Their songs grow softer, their dreams more fragile, but they have not been abandoned. Something stirs, not yet visible, not yet loud, but soon. The God who hears is listening. The God who sees is watching, and the wheels of history, slow and grinding, are beginning to turn. Some stories begin with thunder wars, kings, grand declarations. But the greatest stories, the ones that reshape the destiny of nations, often begin in silence. A poor Hebrew woman, hidden behind thin linen walls, rests her hand on her swollen belly. She is afraid. She has every reason to be. The Pharaoh's latest decree has spread like wind-blown ash. Every male Hebrew child is to be killed at birth, thrown into the Nile like refuse. It is a command that has turned childbirth into a sentence of death. But still, she chooses to give life. Her name is Jochebed. Her husband's name is Amram. Their names are rarely spoken in grand temples, but history will remember them. The pain of labor is not new to her. She already has 2 children, Miriam and Aaron. But this time, she delivers in a deeper silence. No midwives, no cries, just trembling breath and hushed prayers that her newborn child does not scream. And then he arrives. A boy, alive, breathing, beautiful. The scripture says simply, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But such a line carries oceans of emotion. For every day she hid him, death hovered near. Egyptian patrols searched homes. Neighbors whispered. Every cry from the child was a gamble with fate. But Jochebed held on. For 3 months she nursed him, soothed him, sang to him in hushed tones, even as fear lodged in her chest like stone. And then the day came. She could no longer hide him. What kind of courage must it take to place your child into a river, to craft a basket of reeds, seal it with pitch and tar, and lay your infant, your son, onto the uncertain waters? She wraps him tightly, kisses his forehead. Her eyes, tired but determined, lock with Miriam's. Follow him, she says. Watch, and so the baby floats. The Nile, wide and ancient, cradles him gently. It is a strange reversal. The river that had swallowed countless children now becomes a path of deliverance. Reeds sway, sunlight dapples the water's surface. The cries of the child, small and helpless, draw the attention of someone unexpected. Pharaoh's daughter. She is royalty, draped in linen, flanked by attendants, perhaps enjoying the calm of morning as she bathes in the river. But as her eyes fall upon the basket, something stirs. She opens it. The child cries, and she, this daughter of Egypt, feels compassion. Despite knowing this child must be Hebrew, despite the risks, she chooses to save him. This moment, a young Egyptian woman defying her father's genocidal decree, becomes one of the quiet revolutions in history. And then, fate intervenes again. From the reeds, Miriam steps forward. Brave, clever, calm beyond her years. "Shall I fetch a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" she asks. Pharaoh's daughter agrees. And so, unknowingly, she returns the child to his mother. Imagine that reunion, Jochebed holding her son again, now not in secret, but under protection, paid even to care for him. For a few short years, she will nurse him, teach him, whisper the stories of his people into his ears, stories of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, stories of their God. And then she lets him go. The day must have come quietly. No one writes about how her hands trembled as she handed him over to the palace, or how she watched him disappear through gates she could never enter. He will grow up in Pharaoh's house, fed by royal servants, taught to write hieroglyphs, to read the stars, to lead armies, to speak as a prince. He will wear linen robes and golden collars. He will be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. But in the hidden places of his heart, something else will live. His name is Moses. The Egyptians will call him a prince. The Hebrews will call him a stranger. But destiny will call him something else altogether. For now, he is just a boy, running through palace corridors, studying scrolls by oil lamp light, attending ceremonies for gods he does not know, but he watches, learns, and deep within, the memories planted by his mother still bloom. Perhaps he wonders why he doesn't look like his cousins, why the palace guards glance at him differently, why the slaves who bow in the courtyards look at him with unreadable eyes. Perhaps he knows more than he lets on. Years pass. Egypt continues its rhythm of stone and sun, its courts filled with intrigue, its temples with chants. The Hebrew slaves continue to suffer. And Moses, neither fully Egyptian nor truly Hebrew, walks between two worlds, belonging to neither. There's something haunting about growing up inside the empire built on the backs of your own people. But destiny is patient. It waits, and it watches. Moses has not yet heard the voice in the burning bush. He has not yet stood before Pharaoh or raised his staff over the sea, but his life has already been marked by water, by courage, by the quiet defiance of women who chose life. His mother, who let him go to save him. His sister, who followed him. A princess who defied an empire, and a God who was already moving in silence. The Hebrews don't know his name yet. The Egyptians don't know what he will become. Even Moses himself, for now, is only a boy chasing shadows through palace halls. But the river that carried him once still flows. And it carries more than water. It carries promise. Inside the gilded halls of Pharaoh's palace, beneath soaring columns etched with the names of gods and kings, a boy grows. He walks with quiet confidence between polished limestone floors, through chambers heavy with incense, and past hieroglyphs that tell the triumphs of Egypt's divine rulers. His name echoes in two tongues. In the royal court, they call him Mesu, born of water, a poetic nod to the river that carried him. But among whispers in the corridors, among the murmuring servants, and the quiet glances of the Hebrews, he sometimes passes by. He's known differently. Moses. To the Egyptians, he is a Prince Pharaoh's grandson, raised in luxury. His feet have never touched the muddy fields of Goshen. He eats honeyed bread, drinks date wine, and learns languages from tutors who once advised generals. His mind is sharp, his gaze searching, and yet there is a restlessness within him. He is not like the other young nobles who laugh too loudly and revel in the games of court politics. Moses listens more than he speaks. He watches, and sometimes, late at night, when the palace is quiet and the oil lamps burn low, he finds himself standing at the edge of his balcony, looking beyond the city's walls toward Goshen, toward something unnamed that pulls at him like gravity. The Hebrews work through the heat of day and into the night. And though Moses has been told they are foreign labor, a necessary part of Egypt's prosperity, there's something about their eyes that unsettles him, a sadness, a strength, a sameness. He begins to ask questions. Who were my parents? Where was I born? Why do I not resemble my cousins? Why does my skin tone match the builders more than the priests? Pharaoh's daughter offers only a gentle smile and tells him what she's always told him. You are my son, Moses. That is enough. But it isn't. One afternoon, while passing through a narrow market alley, Moses hears a name spoken softly, Yahweh. It means nothing to the guards beside him, but it strikes Moses like a whisper from the past. He begins walking among the workers more often, at first under the pretense of inspection. But gradually, more slowly, he begins to listen. He sees the way their hands tremble with exhaustion, the way they whisper encouragement to one another, the way they survive despite it all. One day, he catches sight of a woman with a face that jolts something deep inside him. She looks like someone from a dream. Her eyes meet his, and for a fleeting moment, something silent passes between them. Recognition, memory, a mother's prayer answered. He will never know. The palace does not encourage such connections. Instead, it teaches that Egypt is eternal, that Pharaoh is divine, that order is everything. Moses learns astronomy, mathematics, law, architecture, and the sacred rituals of the gods. He sits in temples and watches, embalming priests perform rites that promise immortality. But these rituals feel empty, as though they are built atop forgotten bones. One night, during a royal festival, Moses watches as priests carry golden statues of Horus through the streets. Crowds bow, drums echo. The sky burns orange with torches. And yet, amid the splendor, Moses feels hollow. Who am I? Why am I here? He begins having dreams of rivers, of fire, of voices calling from mountaintops, dreams that leave him breathless, unsure whether they're warnings or invitations. Meanwhile, the Hebrews grow more restless. Rumors of rebellion begin to stir. The labor grows heavier, the punishments harsher. And Moses, despite himself, finds his heart pulled further away from Egypt. And then it happens. One day, walking through the edge of a worksite, he sees an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave. Not just striking, but beating, relentless, cruel, purposeful. The Hebrew man cries out, and something in Moses breaks. He looks around. No one else is watching. And in a single moment, filled with fury, confusion, and helplessness, he strikes. The overseer falls, dead, lifeless in the dust. The silence afterward is deafening. Moses buries the body, his heart pounding in his ears. But something has changed. The lines he once straddled are now broken. The next day, two Hebrews argue nearby. Moses tries to intervene, still reeling from what he's done, but one of them spits bitterly. Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And just like that, it's no longer a secret. The palace will know. Pharaoh will know. And Moses knows he can no longer stay. That night, without ceremony, without farewell, Moses leaves the palace. The corridors where he once ran as a child echo behind him. The city gates close quietly as he walks into the wilderness, each step away from Egypt stripping him of titles, luxuries, and the only life he's ever known. He is no longer a prince. He is no longer a slave son. He is alone. But the desert has always been a place of transformation. It burns away illusions, strips men bare, and in the silence of sand and stone, a new kind of voice begins to whisper. He walks. Days turn to weeks. Hunger gnaws at him. Thirst bites his lips. But still he walks. Eventually, a land comes into view. Midian, a place beyond Egypt's reach. A land of nomads and shepherds. A land where Moses, the prince who once had everything, will become nothing. Or perhaps something far greater. Exile is not always punishment. Sometimes it is a crucible, a place where identity is melted down to its barest elements and reshaped into something new. That is where Moses finds himself now, walking alone, sand clinging to his skin, past the long reach of Egyptian memory. He is no longer protected by linen robes or marble columns. The guards do not know his name here. The gods of Egypt do not watch this land. The desert, vast and ancient, receives him not as a prince, but as a stranger. His feet blister. His thoughts churn. He has no map, no destination. Only guilt trailing him like a second shadow. The face of the man he killed flickers in his mind, not in anger, but in weight. A weight he cannot drop. By the time he stumbles into Midian, the sun has burned his back raw, and his voice has been quieted by thirst. Midian is no city. It is a scattering of tents, herds, wells. A place where people live by the rhythms of the land. Its people are distant cousins to the Hebrews, descendants of Abraham through his second wife, Keturah. Moses stops at a well, collapsing like a man chased by ghosts. Here, another story begins. A group of young women approaches the well, leading their flocks. Among them is Zipporah, daughter of a local priest named Jethro, also known as Rule. They begin drawing water, but soon shepherds arrive, rough, territorial, trying to drive them off. Moses watches. For a moment, perhaps, he considers staying out of it. But something within him, some old echo of justice, won't allow that. He stands, this time not with fists, not with death, but with strength and presence. The shepherds back away. The women fill their troughs, their eyes filled with quiet gratitude. They return to their father sooner than expected, and Jethro, curious, asks why. There was an Egyptian, they say, who rescued us. Moses, an Egyptian in name, but no longer in spirit, is invited to Jethro's tent. Bread is offered, water. A bed beneath stars far from Pharaoh's reach. And in this quiet place, with no titles, no gold, and no echoes of the court, Moses begins to rest. Not just his body, but his soul. Time in Midian slows. Days are measured by sunrises, goat bells, and wind. Moses finds work tending flocks. The same hands that once held scrolls now guide sheep across barren plains. His eyes, once trained on the geometry of pyramids, now scan the sky for rain. He marries Zipporah. They live simply. He becomes a father. They name their firstborn Gershom, which means, I have become a stranger in a strange land. The name says everything. Years pass. Moses' beard grows. His voice deepens. The rage that once boiled in his chest now simmers into reflection. Yet somewhere within him, the ember of purpose remains. Quiet, undemanding, waiting. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, time grinds forward. Pharaoh dies. Another takes his place. The throne remains, and the Hebrews remain in chains. Their cries grow louder, their backs more bent. They pray, not knowing if they're heard. And yet, the narrative tells us something stirring. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. But how does the divine respond? With storms? With fire? No, with a shepherd in exile, a man broken and rebuilt by silence. The desert changes a man. It strips away ambition, vanity, noise. It teaches patience, slowness. It trains the ears to hear more than just wind. And on one ordinary day, during an ordinary task, Moses is walking with his flock across the far side of the wilderness, toward Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he sees something strange. A bush blazing with fire, yet not consumed. He stops, approaches, and the fire speaks. But that moment, so profound, so still, belongs to the next part of our story. For now, Moses stands on the edge of everything he has been, and everything he is about to become. The turning point has come not in the palace, not with swords, but in the wilderness, with sheep, with stillness, with time. Let's step back just a little. Think of the journey so far. A boy born under threat, hidden in a basket. A child raised among gods and tyrants. a man who struck in anger and ran in shame, a wanderer now settled, but not at peace. Each piece of his life feels like a separate story, but soon they will converge, because calling comes not just from greatness, but from brokenness. And Moses, the exile, the outcast, the shepherd, is about to hear his name spoken from flame. The desert has many voices. Most are soft, wind rustling through thorns, the shifting of stones under hoof, the distant cry of a hawk overhead. These are the sounds Moses has grown used to. Years of shepherding have taught him the rhythm of silence. In the wilderness, stillness is survival. But today, silence breaks. It begins not with a sound, but a sight. A bush common enough in this dry terrain, yet something is not right. Its branches dance with flame, yet the wood does not blacken. The leaves do not curl. The fire is alive, but still. It burns without consuming. Moses stops. Perhaps he rubs his eyes, stares again. His heart begins to stir, not in fear, but in wonder. This is no trick of the light. Something is happening here, something beyond language. So he turns, slowly. He walks toward the fire. And then a voice, clear, firm, and yet like nothing he's ever heard. Moses, Moses, he freezes. His name spoken from flame. He answers, with a voice barely his own. Here I am. Then the voice again. Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Holy ground, not temple stone, not carved altars, just dry desert earth made sacred by presence. Moses kneels, removes his sandals. Dust clings to his feet. The fire crackles softly. The voice speaks once more. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hides his face. It is too much. The weight of that name. The name whispered through generations of slaves. The name carried in bedtime stories by candlelight. The name that had been silent until now. But the voice does not accuse. It does not condemn. It says, I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I know their suffering. And I have come down to rescue them. For a moment, Moses says nothing. This God has not forgotten, not turned away, not abandoned the children of Abraham. The silence that once haunted the Hebrews was not absence, it was preparation. And now the voice continues. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Moses' heart stops. Go back to Egypt, to the court where he is wanted for murder, to the throne he fled, to the pain he tried to bury. He stammers, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? It's not false humility. It's fear, memory, doubt. But the fire does not flicker. The voice is calm. I will be with you. And then, as if knowing Moses' deeper fears, the voice offers a sign, a promise that when he brings the people out, he will return to this very mountain, not alone, but with a nation. Still, Moses hesitates. He asks again, "Suppose I go and they ask me, 'What is his name?' What shall I say?" And here something extraordinary happens. God speaks his name, not a title, not a role, a name. "I am who I am." Tell them, "I am has sent me to you, Yahweh, the becoming one, the ever-present, ever-being." A name that holds past, present, and future in one breath. The conversation continues. Moses pleads. He protests. He says he is slow of speech, not a man of words. But the flame replies, "Who gave humans their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Is it not I?" And yet, in mercy, the voice offers help. His brother Aaron will go with him, speak for him, but the call remains. Moses will return to Egypt not as a prince, not as a fugitive, but as a messenger. A voice for the voiceless, a shepherd with fire in his bones. Before the fire fades, God gives him 3 signs to carry. A staff that will turn to a serpent and back again. A hand that will become leprous, then healed. And water from the Nile that will become blood upon the sand. Symbols not of power for power's sake, but of a divine message. I see, I hear, I act. Moses leaves the mountain changed. The staff in his hand is no longer just for guiding sheep. It is now a rod of authority, a symbol of calling. He returns to Jethro, tells him what he must do. Zipporah, perhaps confused or afraid, agrees to journey with him. And together, they begin the long road back to Egypt. Every step is a reckoning, but the flame still burns inside him, and though he doubts, though he questions, the fire does not abandon him. He will speak to Pharaoh. He will speak for the people. He will speak because the fire asked him to. And the world will never be the same. The sun hangs low as Moses approaches the outskirts of Egypt. His heart beats slowly, heavily, not just from the weight of distance traveled, but from what lies ahead. This is no ordinary return. Every dune and every shadow is heavy with memory. Once, this land was his home. He had walked its palaces in linen robes. He had dined among generals and scribes, bathed in marble pools, and listened to the hum of politics in chambers carved with gold. And yet, he had also watched, in silence, the backs of Hebrew slaves as they carried burdens beyond measure. Now he returns, not as a prince, but as a prophet. Beside him walks Aaron, his older brother. They speak little, but their bond grows with every mile. Aaron is the voice. Moses is the vessel. As they enter the gates of the imperial city, the grandeur of Egypt rises around them. Statues of gods, stone colonnades, temples to Ra and Osiris, and beyond them all, the palace, Pharaoh's domain. And though the ruler Moses once knew is dead, his successor wears the same crown, a new face, but the same cold eyes of empire. They enter the palace. The court is magnificent, golden light filtering through columns, incense curling through the air. Officials watch from the sides, whispering about the strange men from Midian. Servants stand like statues. Then silence. Pharaoh enters. He sits not hurried, not impatient. He does not yet know that history itself has entered the room. Moses steps forward. His voice does not tremble. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness. There is a moment, almost absurd, where Pharaoh blinks, as if he misheard. Then he laughs. Not a joyful laugh, but one of power amused by audacity. He leans forward. Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. The words hang heavy, but Moses and Aaron do not back down. They speak again of the God of the Hebrews, of the 3-day journey, of the need to worship. They speak not in threats, but in reverence. Pharaoh rises. His voice changes, now sharpened, commanding. He accuses them of idleness, of stirring rebellion among the people. He will not let them go. Instead, he increases their burden. Make the work harder, he says to his overseers. Do not provide straw for their bricks. Let them gather it themselves. But still demand the same quota. And with that, he dismisses them. A silence follows. Moses and Aaron walk out, their hearts heavy. The next day, the cries begin. The Hebrew foremen, beaten, broken, confront Moses. Their voices drip with blame. May the Lord judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials. You have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Moses turns to heaven. His soul cries out, Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh, things have only grown worse. And then, in the quiet, comes the response, a whisper, a promise, a divine certainty. Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Indeed, he will drive them out. The words strike like thunder in Moses' spirit. God is not surprised by Pharaoh's resistance. He anticipated it, even willed it. Why? Because this is not merely an escape story. It is a revelation. Egypt must know, the Hebrews must know, that Yahweh is not just a name. He is the God who sees, who acts, who redeems. And so, God speaks again, not just to Moses, but to history. I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, but by my name Yahweh, I was not fully known to them. I have heard the groaning of the Israelites. I will bring them out. I will free them. I will redeem them with an outstretched arm. With each word, Moses finds strength returning. He is not alone. The task is great. The empire is strong. But the fire still burns. He returns to the people and speaks of deliverance, of a coming freedom. But their hearts are hardened by slavery. They do not believe him. Their ears are full of chains. Even Aaron grows quiet. Still, the command comes again. Go to Pharaoh. Tell him to let my people go. So they go. And this time they bring a sign. Aaron casts Moses' staff upon the ground. It becomes a serpent, alive, writhing. Pharaoh watches. Unimpressed, he signals to his magicians, men skilled in dark arts. They throw their own staffs down, and they too become serpents. But then Moses' serpent devours the others. It is not just a show of power. It is a sign. The gods of Egypt may twist and mimic, but they cannot endure. Still, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses. He believes in the might of Egypt, in the gods of sun and Nile, in the weight of his crown. But the storm is gathering. And Moses knows now this will not be easy. Freedom never is, but it has begun. And the God of fire, the I Am, will not be silent. The land of Egypt, so often radiant under Ra's golden sun, begins to dim, not by cloud or shadow, but by something deeper, a trembling in the air, a pressure that wraps around the breath of a people too proud to kneel. Pharaoh still sits on his throne, unmoved by serpents and speeches. His heart, like the stone of the pyramids, does not bend. But the heavens have spoken. And now the signs will descend not in whispers, but in waves. Moses returns to the Nile. It is morning, the hour when Pharaoh often walks along the riverbank, basking in the light and the power of the gods. The Nile is sacred. Its flow the lifeblood of Egypt, its flooding the calendar by which their world turns. But this morning, Moses waits, staff in hand, Aaron by his side. And when Pharaoh appears, Moses does not hesitate. He lifts the staff, and in a voice neither loud nor soft, speaks, "By this you will know that I am the Lord. With the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed into blood." He lowers the staff, and the river groans. A crimson surge begins. Fish rise belly up. The air thickens with rot. The priests gasp. Even Pharaoh's guards step back, unnerved. Every stream, every canal, even vessels of water in homes, they all turn to blood. It is not an illusion. It is the first sign of unraveling. But Pharaoh is unmoved. His magicians, drawing from familiar enchantments, mimic the plague in small basins, and this imitation hardens his resolve. He turns away. And so begins the rhythm, a cycle of warning, plague, and refusal. 7 days pass, then frogs, not a trickle, but an eruption. They leap from the Nile, invading the homes of Egypt. They are in ovens, on beds, inside royal halls and peasant huts. At first, it is comical, then unbearable. Pharaoh summons Moses. "Plead with your God to take them away. I will let your people go." Moses agrees, and the frogs die, piles of them, reeking in the streets. But when the stench fades, so does Pharaoh's promise, his heart still stone. So the dust becomes gnats. Tiny, maddening, a plague of irritation. Even the magicians cannot replicate it. "This is the finger of God," they whisper. But Pharaoh does not listen. Then flies, swarms, black clouds of wings and legs, thick enough to darken windows, to suffocate crops, to crawl into eyes and mouths. But this time, God draws a line. In the land of Goshen, where the Israelites dwell, there are no flies. The distinction is made, the message clear. Pharaoh begins to waver. He offers a compromise: worship your God, but do it here in Egypt. Moses refuses. Pharaoh relents slightly. Go a little way into the wilderness, but not far. Again, Moses agrees to pray. Again, the plague lifts. And again, Pharaoh hardens. Then comes the fifth plague, a sickness upon the livestock. Horses, donkeys, camels, herds, and flocks fall in the fields. The economy of Egypt, its pride and wealth, begins to tremble. Still, Pharaoh clings to control. Next, boils. A plague not upon land or beasts, but upon bodies. Ashes tossed into the air become a fine dust that settles upon skin. And wherever it lands, boils rise, painful, seeping. Even the magicians cannot stand before Moses, their skin aflame. But Pharaoh does not yield. Now the sky answers. Moses warns, "Let my people go, or I will send the worst hailstorm Egypt has ever seen." Some among Pharaoh's people begin to listen. They shelter their livestock, fearing the words of this prophet. And when the hail comes, it is apocalyptic. Thunder like war drums, lightning dancing through the clouds, hailstones the size of fists, crops shattered, trees stripped bare. Only Goshen is spared. Again, Pharaoh begs. "I have sinned," he admits. "The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong." Moses lifts his staff, the storm ends, and Pharaoh, once more, goes back on his word. Now locusts, carried by an east wind, they descend like a green tide. Every leaf left from the hail is devoured. Every fruit is gone. The land looks dead, like winter in the middle of harvest. Pharaoh's officials plead with him. "Let the people go. Egypt is ruined." Pharaoh agrees, but only the men may go, he says. Moses refuses. All must go, men, women, children, flocks, and herds. Pharaoh rages. The locusts stay until Moses prays. Then, as they disappear on the wind, the ninth plague falls like a curtain. Darkness. Thick, suffocating. For 3 days, no light. Not even a flicker of flame. People stay where they sit. They do not move, do not speak. It is as though time halts. But in Goshen, there is light. Pharaoh calls Moses again. "Go worship your Lord, take your families, but leave your livestock." Still, Moses says no. Everything must go. Pharaoh's patience shatters. "Leave my presence," he shouts. "If I see you again, you will die." And Moses, calm as the night around them, replies, "You are right. I will never see your face again." The words settle like dust. This is the end of negotiation. No more signs. No more warnings. Only one plague remains. A plague not of blood or beasts or skies, but of life itself. And in the quiet that follows, the breath of Egypt stills, unaware that its darkest hour is yet to come. Egypt, once the crown of civilization, now sits trembling beneath the weight of something it cannot name. Its people whisper in fear. Its gods are silent. Its Pharaoh, once the embodiment of divine authority, stands on a throne cracking beneath him, but still he refuses. And so, Moses returns one final time, not to bargain, not to warn, but to deliver a truth carved in heaven itself. Thus says the Lord, about midnight, I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land shall die. The words settle like frost on Pharaoh's skin. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the servant girl who is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be no exceptions. There will be no negotiations. This is the final sign, not just to Egypt, but to history. It is the night when death will walk among the living. But in the land of Goshen, something else stirs. Moses gathers the people. The instructions are exact, sacred, symbolic. Each family must choose a lamb unblemished, pure. It is not just a sacrifice. It is a sign. They are to slaughter it at twilight. Its blood must be painted on the doorframes, top, sides, a mark of obedience, a shield against what is to come. Inside, they are to roast the lamb whole, eat it quickly, with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. Not a bone may be broken. They must eat with their sandals on, their robes tucked, staffs in hand, as if ready to depart at any moment. This is not a feast of comfort. It is a memorial in advance, a meal that remembers something that has not yet happened. And when night falls, so does the stillness of judgment. The Lord moves through Egypt not in anger, but in divine justice. And where there is no blood on the door, the firstborn falls. The cry rises like a wave. In every house, a life is taken, from the chambers of the palace to the mud huts in the fields, from the rich to the poor. Even the animals are not spared. Pharaoh's own son, his heir, the future of his dynasty, does not wake. The wail that escapes Pharaoh is not of a king. It is of a father broken. For the first time, power means nothing. He calls for Moses in the dead of night. Rise, go, leave my people. Take your flocks, your herds. Bless me also. The command is not shouted. It is whispered. A plea from a man crushed beneath the weight of divine justice. And so, after 4 centuries in chains, the Israelites are free. There is no celebration. Not yet. There is only motion. They leave in haste. Bread still flat from no time to rise. Cloaks wrapped tight. Children in arms. The Egyptians urge them on, even giving them silver and gold, anything to speed their departure. A mixed multitude joins them, others who saw the signs, who believed, who feared. They march not just as refugees, but as a people reborn. And as they go, the memory of that night becomes law. It is called Pesach, Passover. It will be remembered forever. Not because death came, but because it passed over. Because faith made the difference between sorrow and salvation. It is a night that Israel will never forget. But though they are free, the journey has only begun. Ahead lies a wilderness, a sea, a pursuer whose heart will turn once more. The night may be over, but the story is far from done. The night of the 10th plague had passed, but its echo still clung to the air. Egypt had been broken, and the Hebrews were finally walking out, not as slaves, but as a people destined for something far greater. They left in haste, in silence, in awe. The sun had barely risen, and already the roads out of Egypt bore the footprints of a nation, men, women, children, elders, all moving as one. Behind them, the homes of their oppression. Ahead, the unknown. But they were not alone. Scripture says, "The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to guide them, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light." Imagine it towering, alive, blazing against the night sky. A divine compass, a guardian presence. They marched toward the wilderness, not by the shortest path, but the one God chose toward the Red Sea. At first, it felt like peace, the kind of peace that comes only after a storm. The people breathed deeply. Children laughed for the first time without fear. Mothers walked without looking over their shoulders. But peace, as always, is brief in the pages of Exodus. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh sat in silence. The palace was still too still. No commands, no servants bustling about. Only the emptiness left behind by judgment. And then his grief curdled. "What have we done?" he asked his officials. "We have let them go from serving us." It was no longer sorrow, it was pride awakening again. His heart hardened one last time. He summoned his chariots, 600 of the best, and countless more horses and riders. Steel glinting beneath the sun, hooves pounding the ground. The desert shook. Freedom had barely begun before it was threatened again. Meanwhile, the Israelites camped by the sea Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. A strange place to stop. A trap, it would seem. Mountains on one side, the Red Sea on the other. No escape. And then they heard it. The low thunder of hooves, the metallic clatter of weapons, dust on the horizon. Panic rippled through the camp like wildfire. Cries rose. "Why have you brought us here to die? Were there not enough graves in Egypt?" It was a bitter irony, just days into their deliverance, already yearning for chains over faith. But Moses stood firm. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." It was not a command to fight. It was a call to watch, to witness what happens when heaven parts the veil of nature. Then the angel of God, who had gone before them, moved behind them. The pillar of cloud followed, positioning itself between the Egyptians and the Israelites, darkness to one side, light to the other, a supernatural wall of separation. All night, the wind blew strong and steady, not chaos, but purpose. And slowly the sea obeyed. Its waters peeled back, wall upon wall, held by invisible hands. The seabed dried underfoot, a highway made of miracles. Moses lifted his staff. The people stepped forward, step by step, into the impossible. Imagine it, towering waves frozen in place, moonlight glinting off the walls of water, children staring in wonder, elders trembling but walking on. Behind them, Pharaoh's army pursued unrelenting, blind to the divine even now. But the Lord was not done. As the last Israelite stepped out of the sea, the waters began to stir. Confusion spread in the Egyptian ranks. Their wheels stuck, the ground betrayed them. And then came the flood. The sea returned, crashing down, not as chaos, but as justice. Not a single Egyptian survived. The silence afterward was sacred. The Israelites stood on the far shore free, not just in body, but in soul. Their oppressors gone, their path clear. And then, as if history itself paused for breath, a song rose. Moses led them in it. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the anthem of a nation born in water. But the wilderness lay ahead, a place of testing, a place of encounter. The Red Sea had closed behind them. There was no going back, only forward toward the mountain of God. The sun rose differently that morning, brighter, clearer, as if the heavens themselves had opened a new path for this nomadic people, now reborn in freedom. On the far shore of the Red Sea, the Israelites were not the same as the ones who had wept under Pharaoh's whip. They had crossed through water as through a birth canal, and now the world felt new, dangerous, yes, but wide open. They were free, but freedom, as we know, is never easy. The first days of the journey were carried on the winds of triumph. The song of the sea still rang in their ears, and the image of the Egyptian army swallowed by the Red Sea stood as proof of divine favor. But joy, like manna, has a short shelf life in the desert. They journeyed 3 days into the wilderness without finding water. And thirst is a strange torment. It dries not only the tongue, but the spirit. It blurs the line between memory and madness. When they finally found water at Marah, they rushed to drink only to spit it out. It was bitter, undrinkable. Again, the complaints began. What shall we drink? They cried, not with curiosity, but with accusation, as if Moses had led them into a cruel trap. Moses prayed, and God responded not with thunder, but with a tree. He was told to throw the branch into the water, and the bitterness faded. The waters sweetened. It was a moment that taught them something subtle but vital. Not all miracles look like parting seas. Some come quietly, like sweetness in a place of bitterness. From Marah, they moved to Elim, a place of rest, with 12 springs and 70 palm trees. There, beneath the shade, they breathed again. But it was a pause, not a destination. The wilderness was calling them onward. Soon, food became the new fear. The people remembered Egypt strangely, not for its chains, but for its stew pots, meat, bread, fullness. They said, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full." It's remarkable, isn't it? How the past is often polished by hunger, how memory paints slavery as comfort when the belly is empty. But again, God did not respond with wrath. He responded with provision. He told Moses that he would rain bread from heaven. And in the morning, the dew lifted, and the ground was covered with something fine and flaky, manna. They didn't know what it was. In Hebrew, they asked, "Manhu, what is it?" It became their daily bread, and with it came instructions. Gather only what you need. Do not hoard. On the 6th day, gather double. On the 7th, rest. It wasn't just food. It was discipline, a rhythm of trust, a divine economy where faith was the currency. But even then, some disobeyed. Some tried to hoard manna and found it rotting by morning, filled with worms. Others went looking on the Sabbath and found nothing. This was the wilderness's deeper lesson. Survival was no longer about strength. It was about obedience, about learning to walk with the unseen. Still, not all problems were spiritual. Water ran out again at Rephidim, and the people's anger burned hotter than the desert sun. They quarreled with Moses. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" They were on the edge of mutiny. Moses cried out to God, and God answered again, not with rebuke, but with a command. "Strike the rock," he said, "and water will come out of it." Moses obeyed, and the rock, that unlikely vessel, poured forth life. It was a strange miracle, one that echoed with symbolism. A rock, unmoving, dry, becoming the source of flowing water. Like Egypt yielding freedom. Like bitterness turned to sweetness. And then came the first war. The Amalekites attacked. These were desert raiders, merciless, opportunistic. The Israelites, untrained in war, had never held swords before. But Moses called on Joshua to lead the men into battle, and Moses, along with Aaron and Hur, climbed a hill above the fight. As long as Moses held his hands up, Israel prevailed. When his arms grew tired and dropped, the Amalekites gained ground. So Aaron and Hur stood beside him, each supporting one arm, keeping them raised till sunset. It wasn't the sword that won the day. It was perseverance, intercession, the image of weary arms held high. They defeated Amalek, but more importantly, they learned that strength lies not in numbers, but in unity and faith. And then, a visit. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with Moses' wife and sons, a reunion of family in the midst of wandering. And Jethro, wise and observant, saw Moses judging all matters of the people alone, morning till evening. He offered counsel. "Delegate," he said, "appoint leaders over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them handle the smaller matters. You focus on the big ones." Moses listened. It was the first glimpse of structure in the wilderness. Not law yet, but the bones of a nation. And then came the destination that had always been calling them. Mount Sinai, rising like a jagged tooth from the earth, cloaked in mystery, whispered about in stories. The people approached, not just physically, but spiritually. They were about to hear the voice of the one who had delivered them, not through dreams, not through symbols, but directly. Soon the mountain would burn with fire. Soon the thunder would roll. Soon the covenant would be offered, but for now they camped at its base. waiting. There are moments when the natural world seems to bend, when the earth grows still in reverence, and the sky leans low as if listening. Mount Sinai, silent for ages, worn by wind and time, stood now like a throne, awaiting its occupant. The Israelites had reached the foot of this sacred mountain. They did not know what would happen, only that something holy was near. Moses climbed the mountain, alone at first, disappearing into the mist. And from the heights, the voice of the Eternal called to him, not with rage, but with purpose. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. It was not just a preamble to law, it was a love letter from heaven, a reminder that they were chosen, cherished, not for conquest, but for covenant. God said, if you will obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Moses descended, and he told the people what the Lord had spoken, and they responded with one voice, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. A promise made in unison, unaware yet of the weight it carried. Then the preparation began. God instructed them to consecrate themselves, wash their garments, refrain from worldly distractions. Be ready, for on the third day the Lord would descend. And so they waited. 3 days in the shadow of Sinai, 3 days to wonder what it meant for God Himself to appear. Then came the morning of revelation. Thunder cracked across a cloudless sky. Lightning danced across the summit. A thick cloud wrapped the mountain in veils of smoke. The whole mountain shook violently, and the sound of a trumpet, strange, unending, grew louder and louder. The people trembled. Moses led them forward to the base of the mountain, but not one step beyond. God had drawn a boundary. Even touching the mountain uninvited would mean death. Then the voice spoke, not through a prophet, not through dreams, but audibly from fire and smoke, from storm and cloud. The 10 words, the Decalogue, the commandments, each sentence like thunder in the soul. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt. Not a command, but an identity, a declaration of relationship. Then the laws began. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. Each command carved a line not in stone yet, but in the hearts of the people. A moral architecture, a new way of being. But the people were terrified. The sound of God's voice overwhelmed them. They begged Moses, you speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, or we will die. So Moses stood between the people and the fire. He entered the thick darkness where God was. And there, in that sacred cloud, the deeper instructions unfolded, not only for the soul, but for society. Laws about justice and mercy, about how to treat the poor, the foreigner, the widow, the orphan. Commands for Sabbath rest for people, and even for the land. A vision of holiness not just as ritual, but as daily rhythm. And then God gave Moses something tangible, 2 stone tablets, written with the finger of God. It was more than law. It was covenant, a binding agreement. The people had been freed from Pharaoh, but now they would be bound by something greater than empire, a moral code written not on parchment, but stone, and eventually into history itself. Moses stayed on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. The fire never ceased. The cloud never lifted. In that time, God gave detailed instructions for the building of a sanctuary, the Tabernacle, a place where God would dwell among them, not above, not far, but with the Ark of the Covenant, the golden lampstand, the altar, the curtains. Every detail was precise, symbolic. Heaven's pattern mirrored on earth. Meanwhile, at the base of the mountain, time stretched. The people grew restless. 40 days without their leader. 40 days of silence. Doubt crept in like a slow fog, and soon it would lead to their greatest failure. But for now, on the mountaintop, Moses held the law. It was weighty not just in stone, but in spirit. A guide for generations yet unborn. An invisible flame that would burn across deserts, cities, kingdoms, and into the conscience of humanity. As Moses turned to descend, the sun broke through the mist, and in the valley below, choices waited. Freedom had been won, but would it be kept? 40 days. That's how long Moses had been on the mountain, wrapped in divine mystery, communing with the eternal. But for the people below, 40 days felt like forever. Time became suspicion. Silence turned to fear. Had Moses perished in the fire atop the mountain? Had God abandoned them? The hearts that once trembled with reverence began to ache for certainty, any certainty, even if it meant reaching backward into the old ways of Egypt. And so, in the heat of impatience, they turned to Aaron, the brother of Moses, the priest in waiting. "Make us a god," they said, "a god who will go before us. We do not know what has become of this Moses." Aaron hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he gathered their gold, the earrings, the ornaments, the relics of Egypt's wealth, now twisted into something dangerous. He cast them into the fire and fashioned from them a calf, a molten image shaped from memory, echoing the sacred bulls of Egypt. And when the image cooled, they declared, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." It was a betrayal not only of Moses, but of the very voice that had thundered from Sinai just days before. No other gods, no graven images, no worship of what is made by hands. And yet, here they were, dancing before a statue of gold, while the mountain behind them still smoldered with God's glory. They built an altar before the calf. They offered sacrifices. They feasted. They danced. It was not just idolatry. It was the breaking of a covenant barely formed, a return to chains they thought they had shed, And on the mountain, God knew. He spoke to Moses not with thunder now, but with sorrow. "Go down," he said. "Your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." God's anger burned. He threatened to destroy them all and start anew, with Moses alone. But Moses, this tired, faithful man, stood in the breach. He did not defend their actions, but he pleaded for their lives. Why should the Egyptians say, "He brought them out to kill them in the mountains"? Turn from your fierce wrath. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants. It was not manipulation, it was remembrance. And God relented. Moses descended the mountain. In his hands were the 2 stone tablets etched by the finger of God himself. But as he drew closer, he heard music, laughter, a strange sound for a people called to holiness. Then he saw it, the dancing, the golden calf shimmering in the firelight. The covenant shattered before his eyes, not metaphorically, but physically, as Moses threw the tablets to the ground. Stone broke against stone. The law broken by lawlessness. He seized the calf, burned it with fire, ground it into dust, scattered it upon water, and made the people drink it. It was not revenge. It was reckoning. Aaron, confronted, gave a feeble excuse. "You know how prone the people are to evil. I threw the gold into the fire, and out came this calf." But Moses wasn't deceived. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And then came judgment. Moses stood at the camp's entrance and cried, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." The sons of Levi came forward. And on that day, in a tragic reckoning, about 3,000 men fell. The cost of disobedience was not abstract, it was measured in blood. Yet even after judgment, Moses was not finished. He returned to the mountain, not to receive more commandments, but to intercede again. He prayed a dangerous prayer. "If you will forgive their sin, forgive it. But if not, blot me out of your book." He offered his own life for theirs. But God answered, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out. But go now and lead the people." There would be consequences, but not abandonment. God sent a plague, yes, but he also promised that his angel would still go before them. Still, there was a sadness now, a distance that hadn't existed before. The closeness once offered had been scarred by betrayal. Moses pitched a tent outside the camp, a meeting place where God would still speak with him, face to face, as a friend speaks with a friend. But the question remained, would God still dwell among them? Would the covenant be renewed? Could holiness return to a people who had danced before a lie? The tablets were broken, but the story wasn't. There was still mercy to be found. If they could turn again, if their hearts would be reshaped like stone under divine fire, perhaps, just perhaps, the covenant could be restored. The golden calf had cast a long shadow, but the mountain still stood, and from its summit, hope would speak again. The camp was quiet now, not the silence of sleep, nor the hush of reverence, but the stillness that follows ruin, the calm after a storm that left souls torn open and faces pale with shame. Moses sat once more in solitude, eyes weary, his heart heavier than stone. He had walked down the mountain bearing the word of God, and now he would walk up again, not in triumph, but in intercession. The covenant had been broken, the tablets smashed. The people had danced before a God of their own making. But somehow, impossibly, Moses still hoped. He climbed again, not to command, not to receive, but to plead, to see if, after betrayal and judgment, there could still be reconciliation. This time, he carried stone of his own 2 tablets he had carved with his hands, to replace those written by the hand of God. It was symbolic and sobering. The first tablets had come from God alone, a divine gift. Now, it was a partnership, Moses shaping the stone, God writing once more upon them. Grace now required participation. As he reached the summit, the mountain that once thundered with fire now seemed cloaked in mystery, gentler somehow, as if the voice of God now whispered rather than roared. Then, suddenly he came, not in fury, but in presence, and the Lord descended in a cloud. A hush fell over the sacred peak as Moses bowed in the cleft of the rock, and God passed before him, not just a voice, not just a lawgiver, but a name, a nature, a revelation of character. The Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and sin. Moses trembled not from fear, but awe. This was not the God of vengeance feared by nations. This was the God who heals, who forgives, who renews covenants even when they've been shattered. Moses fell to the ground and whispered the words he barely dared to hope. If now I have found grace in your sight, O Lord, go among us. For this people is stiff-necked, but pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And then it happened. God said yes. Yes, he would go with them. Yes, the covenant would be renewed. Yes, he would once more be their God, and they his people. But this time, there would be no confusion, no room for idols or distractions. God instructed Moses to carve out the laws again, word for word, symbol by symbol. And so, the tablets were rewritten, not with new commandments, but the same ones, now born from mercy. This was not a new religion. This was the mending of a broken one. God gave instructions again about feasts, about worship, about resting on the Sabbath, about offering the first of the harvest. It was a reminder. Their lives were not their own. Everything they had, every field, every child, every breath, was part of a relationship with the divine. When Moses finally descended the mountain this time, the people awaited in silence. But something was different. His face shone, radiant, lit from within with the echo of divine presence. It frightened them, not because it was terrible, but because it was too beautiful, too pure, a reflection of something they had lost and now were being invited to reclaim. From then on, whenever Moses spoke with God, he would remove the veil. And when he returned to the people, he would cover his face again, because the light was too much for human eyes to bear. The covenant was restored, but more importantly, the presence of God would dwell among them once again. And so began the instructions for the tabernacle, a sanctuary, a dwelling place where heaven would kiss earth. It was not an opulent palace. It was a tent, movable, intimate, alive. Its blueprints were precise: ark, veil, lampstand, altar, basin, each piece a symbol, a shadow of heavenly realities. God was not distant. He was in the midst, in a tent among tents, in the wilderness of broken people. God chose to live beside them. Imagine that. A deity not high on a throne of gold, but walking among dusty-footed nomads, forgiving, guiding, shaping. The golden calf was melted into dust, but the Ark of the Covenant would be overlaid with gold of a different kind, gold that held no idols, only testimony. The law, broken once, would now be sealed inside the ark, beneath the wings of cherubim. Between those wings would be the mercy seat. It's a stunning image, justice and law sealed beneath, but mercy above, where God would speak. Mercy covering law, grace above judgment, presence over punishment. And so the people gave gold, silver, linen, oil, acacia wood, each one bringing what they could, not out of obligation, but hope. The tabernacle wasn't just a place, it was a promise that even after betrayal, even after rebellion, even after dancing before false gods, God would still come close. He would dwell among them. He would journey with them. He would lead them home. The desert still stretched ahead. The promised land was still distant. But something far more precious had been restored: relationship, covenant, a future. And in that sacred tent, beneath woven curtains and golden rings, between lampstands and incense, the voice of God would once again whisper, "I am with you." And in that whisper, generations would find peace. Night falls again across the wilderness. The tents are still. The stars shimmer like ancient witnesses, glistening above the sleeping camp of a people once enslaved, now redeemed. And there, in the center, veiled in sacred silence, stands the tabernacle, not just a structure, but a statement, a sanctuary, a promise made visible. The journey of Exodus does not truly end, for it was never merely a journey from place to place. It was a transformation, a becoming. A story that began with silence in the brick pits of Egypt ends with music in the hearts of a people who now know freedom, not just the kind that breaks chains, but the kind that binds them to something greater than themselves. But tonight, as the fire flickers low and the embers of memory glow gently in the soul, let's reflect what truly was Exodus. It was not just a tale of plagues and partings, laws and tablets, sin and sanctity. It was the journey of a people discovering who they are, and more deeply, discovering whose they are. When Moses first stood before the burning bush, the voice from within didn't begin with commands or judgment. or warnings. It began with a name. I am that I am. That statement, whispered in flame, echoed through the centuries, redefining what it meant to worship, not a god of wood or gold or storm, but a being whose presence fills heaven and earth, who hears the cries of the oppressed and acts. The book of Exodus is not history to be shelved. It is living breath. It is fire that still burns. It asks of every generation, where are your idols? What chains still bind you? And who do you trust to lead you through your wilderness? The Israelites didn't reach the promised land within the pages of Exodus. That would come later. Their journey would continue, filled with more wandering, more struggle, more grace. But what Exodus gives is something eternal: memory, identity, a mirror for the soul. And perhaps that's why, to this day, the story is told each year at Passover: bread without leaven, wine poured in remembrance, because Exodus is not over. It's not sealed in parchment. It walks alongside every generation that longs to be free. Even now, in the hush of this moment, wherever you are, maybe in a quiet room, headphones resting gently, eyelids growing heavier with each word, even now, the echo of that story lives on in you. You may not wander a literal desert, but all of us, at times, walk dry and empty roads. We lose our way. We fashion golden calves in the shadows of our own longing. We forget the fire that once called our name, and yet the God of Exodus still whispers, still waits, still calls from the wilderness, inviting us to come, to follow, to trust. In the book of Exodus, we saw how a man who once fled in fear became the voice of a nation, how laws carved in stone became the heartbeat of a people, how divine presence refused to remain distant, choosing instead to dwell in cloth and wood, in desert dust and human hearts. This is not just Israel's story, it's humanity's. It's yours, it's mine. And now, as sleep gently pulls you further from the waking world, let the words settle in like sand settling after the wind. There is no need to rush, no need to strive. You have journeyed with people once lost, now found. You have crossed waters, seen wonders, wept with rebels, and stood again in the glow of mercy. And now you rest, knowing that the same presence that parted seas, that descended in cloud and fire, rests quietly beside you. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. The journey continues, but for tonight, you may simply sleep and let the story keep watch. Good night.